Welcome back to Open Line. We're having a fascinating conversation, going in a couple different directions, but a fascinating conversation nonetheless about H.R. 40, which would establish a commission in Congress to take a look at whether or not slave reparations are necessary in the United States. Jamal has been on the line for a little bit, so I want to go ahead and get to his call. Do we still have Jamal, Taylor? Because I don't see line 4 line. He's gone. Okay. Well, I tell you what, let's go to Jeff on line 3. Jeff, can you hear us? Jeff, are you with us?
Hello. Hello.
Hey there, Jeff. You're on Open Line. Go ahead.
Hey, good to talk to you. I called in because I tuned into the station. God bless those ladies on this panel. I just want to say that to the subject of reclassifying and redefining reparations, how wonderful it is, and how it's a breath of fresh air to think that reparations can be expanded to include educational programs. I think that the context of reparations, when you say it's reparations, it's all, well, we have to give all these people money. It's like, let's all just take a deep breath and realize the potential for goods that can happen, that can be ongoing for generations and generations. I come at it from, I'm on everybody's side here. Love language is, all right, I'm done talking. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff. So Tequila, I guess, any response to that in particular?
No, I think what he said, what Jeff said, was right on target. H.R. 40 is a bill to establish a commission that will begin to explore what reparations can look like over a period of time. And so, I think that when we talk about reparations, everyone has said it here, we immediately go to, we're just going to write all Black people $1 million check. And the reality is reparations is less about money and more about systems and policy, because Black people, we were the commodity at one point. Before the American dollar became what it was, Black people, chattel slavery was the traded commodity. And so you cannot attach a dollar amount to the value that Black people have added to this country, because essentially we built this country. I mean, you think about every railroad you get on, everything. We pretty much built this country. So, you got to think about reparations from a policy standpoint. You got to think about reparations as what the word means, restore. Reparations is about restoring, not just about restoring something to Black people, but about restoring something that has never been in this country to this country. And so we really need to broaden the conversation around reparations for people who aren't Black, that think like, oh, Black people are, because the reality is, like Charlane said, people are afraid. They know that if you give Black people millions of dollars, we're going to surpass pretty much everybody else. And they know that because Black people, with everything that we've endured, we've been able to get to a place where we're at equal playing fields with certain populations, and that's still with us being years and years behind. So I think that the bigger conversation is, people want equity when you talk about it, but people don't want equity when it requires them to potentially be equal with someone else or give up something for someone else to have the same opportunity as them.
Charlane, I want to ask you this, and actually, I want to ask both of you this, because both of you are out in the communities that you serve, and you can see where different investments go. Reverend Fuzz a moment ago talked about HBCUs. I mean, there's a lot of different directions that this can go in. So I'm curious, where do you think money and investments could make the most good? Is it in individual payments to families, or is it in different centers of the community, or is it in colleges, or is it a little bit of everything? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's all the above. We have to, this is about a beliefs and value systems that we're talking about here. The belief that people should be able to determine and be self-determinant and self-reliant and self-sufficient and all the selves, right? Like all the things that we should be able to do on our own. And so when we think about giving money to a direct payment to someone, that is them having a say-so in how they spend that money. But oftentimes we are wrestling with this value systems that Black people are lazy, Black people just want to benefit off the system, and that it could be further from the truth, because like Tequila said, we built this country. There is nothing lazy about us when you think about all that we have had to endure, and we are still here thriving and prospering in spite of our communities being burned down, in spite of our schools being taken away and our businesses being taken away. All of that, we are still here. So it's a value system of, are we going to allow Black people in America to truly be free and full citizens? That's what is really what we're wrestling with here. So yes, it can look like a number of different things. Equity, when we talk about reparations, we got to talk about equity. The flip side of that coin is equity right now. And yes, the way reparations can be delivered can look a few different ways. And yes, it has to be through education. It has to be through healthcare. It has to be through democracy and making sure that we have full access to the ballot. It has to look like reforming and ending mass incarceration and wealth-based detention. All of these systems of harm that have held us back for so many years has to be undone.
I'd like to ask the same question to you, Tequila. Where do you think investments could do the most good in the communities that you serve?
Yeah, I think as Charlane said, it has to be a investment that is not tied to a government system that comes with a set of rules that overgoverns how that investment is deployed. When I think about our HBCUs and our institutions of higher learning, I think about how even with the land grants and the things like that, we are still held to relying on the government to keep those systems working, or, there's never enough for us to become self-reliant. So when we think about investment, it has to be thought about from the standpoint of giving people what is owed to them, giving Black people what is owed to them without having to control it. And I think that is where this commission is going to come in hand, because it's going to take a look at the policies and not just a look at the results of the policies, which would be checks or whatever, but it's going to look at the policies, and it's going to really look at how those policies can begin to shape our communities or reshape our communities, and potential unintended consequences that will come with those policies, which a lot of those things we're experiencing now in our generations, unintended consequences from policies that were passed by people who I hope had good intentions, that, end up being things that now we're having to look at and we're having to redo. We're having to talk about abolishing. We're having to talk about reforming, restructuring. And it's just one of those conversations that is going to be uncomfortable for a while, because these are some questions that we as a nation have to look in the mirror and ask ourselves. When we talk about our country, when we talk about my country 'tis of thee, we talk about things that we don't necessarily live up to or that we don't uphold. And so now America's looking in the mirror. COVID has forced America to look in the mirror, to take a deep look at who we say we are and how those things are actually played out in actions. And I think what's happening is people would rather avoid having that conversation. They would rather avoid having these hard truths really sit at our feet. But it's what's going to have to happen, and that's the first step. We can't even talk about what the investment could look like, because we haven't even acknowledged as a nation that harm is continuously being perpetuated on a group of people that were involuntarily brought here. We still have not even had that conversation as a nation. We're still saying the buzzwords. We're still throwing around equity and diversity and inclusion, and we're not talking about anti-Blackness and systemic racism.
Well, we will have more of our conversation with the two co-founders of the Equity Alliance after this break. You're watching Open Line.